Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. Krishna, 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 Krishna Krishna Rakshamam. Krishna, 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 Krishna Krishna Pahimam. Krishna, 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 Krishna Krishna Pahimam. Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava, Rama Raghava Rakshamam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava Pahimam. Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava Pahimam. Good evening, dear devotees. We continue with our wonderful, super excellent reading of Krishna book, The Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we're very delighted to read this evening the description of the Rasa dance. A Mayavadi philosopher may falsely claim to be God or Krishna, but he cannot actually act like Krishna. He can persuade his followers to falsely imitate the Rasa dance, but he is unable to lift Govardhan Hill. We have many experiences in the past of Mayavadi rascals who delude their followers by posing themselves as Krishna in order to enjoy Rasa Leela. In many instances, they were checked by the government, arrested and punished. In Orissa, Thakur Bhaktivinoda punished a so-called incarnation of Vishnu who was imitating the Rasa Leela with young girls. There were many complaints against the so-called incarnation. At that time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a magistrate, and the government deputed him to deal with that rascal, and he punished him very severely. The Rasa Leela dance cannot be imitated by anyone. Shukadev Goswami warns that one should not even think of imitating it. He specifically mentions that if, out of foolishness, one tries to imitate Krishna's Rasa dance, he will be killed, just like a person who wants to imitate Lord Shiva's drinking of an ocean of poison. Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison and kept it within his throat. The poison made his throat turn blue, and therefore Lord Shiva is called Nilakanta. But if any ordinary person tries to imitate Lord Shiva by drinking poison or smoking ganja, he is sure to be vanquished and will die within a very short time. The Lord Sri Krishna's dealings with the gopis occurred under special circumstances. Most of the gopis in their previous lives were great sages, expert in the study of the Vedas, and when Lord Krishna appeared as Lord Ramachandra, they wanted to enjoy with him. Lord Ramachandra gave them the benediction that their desires would be fulfilled when he would appear as Krishna. Therefore the desire of the gopis to enjoy the appearance of Lord Krishna was long cherished. So they approached the goddess Katyayani to have Krishna as their husband. There are many other circumstances which also testify to the supreme authority of Krishna and show that he is not bound by the rules and regulations of the material world. In special cases, he acts as he likes to favor his devotees. This is possible only for him, because he is the supreme controller. People in general should follow the instructions of Lord Krishna as given in the Bhagavad Gita, and should not even imagine imitating Lord Krishna in the Rasa dance. Krishna's lifting of Govardhan Hill and his killing of great demons like Putana are all obviously extraordinary activities. Similarly, the Rasa dance is also an uncommon activity and cannot be imitated by any ordinary man. An ordinary person engaged in his occupational duty, like Arjuna, should execute his duty for the satisfaction of Krishna. That is within his power. Arjuna was a fighter, and Krishna wanted him to fight for his satisfaction. Arjuna agreed, although at first he was not willing to fight. Duties are required for ordinary persons. They should not jump up and try to imitate Krishna and indulge in Rasa Lila and thus bring about their ruin. One should know with certainty that Krishna had no personal interest in whatever he did for the benediction of the gopis, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Namam karmani limpanti. Krishna never enjoys or suffers the results of his activities. Therefore it is not possible for him to act irreligiously. He is transcendental to all religious duties and principles. He is untouched by the modes of material nature. He is the supreme controller of all living entities, whether in human society, in demigod society in the heavenly planets, or in lower forms of life. And he is also the supreme controller of material nature. Therefore, he has nothing to do with religious or irreligious principles. Shukadev Goswami further concludes that the great sages and devotees who are washed clean of all conditioned life can move freely even within the contamination of material nature by keeping Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, within their hearts. In this way they also do not become subject to the laws of pleasure and pain in the modes of material nature. How then is it possible for Krishna, who appears by his own internal potency, to be subject to the laws of karma? In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord clearly says that whenever he appears, he does so by his internal potency. He is not forced to accept a body by the laws of karma like an ordinary living entity. Every other living entity is forced to accept a certain type of body by his previous actions. But when Krishna appears, he always appears in a body that is not forced upon him by the action of his past deeds. His body is a vehicle for his transcendental pleasure pastimes, which are enacted by his internal potency. He has no obligation to the laws of karma. The Mayavadi monist must accept a certain type of body, being forced by the laws of nature. Therefore, his claim to being one with Krishna or God is only theoretical. Such persons who claim to be equal with Krishna and indulge in Rasa Lila create a dangerous situation for the people in general. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was already present as the Supersoul within the bodies of the gopis and their husbands. He is the guide of all living entities, as is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanash Chaitananam. The Supersoul directs the individual soul to act, and the Supersoul is the actor and witness of all action. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna is present in everyone's heart, and that from him come all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. He is the original person to be known by Vedic knowledge. He is the author of the Vedanta philosophy, and he knows the Vedanta philosophy perfectly well. The so-called Vedantists and Mayavadis cannot understand Krishna as he is. They simply mislead their followers by imitating the actions of Krishna in an unauthorized way. Krishna, the Supersoul of everyone, is already within the body of everyone. Therefore, if he sees someone or embraces someone, there is no question of impropriety. Some ask that if Krishna is self-sufficient, why did he at all manifest the pastimes with the gopis, which are disturbing to the so-called moralists of the world? The answer is that such activities show special mercy to the fallen conditioned souls. The gopis are expansions of his internal energy, but because Krishna wanted to exhibit the Rasa Lila, they appeared as ordinary human beings. In the material world, pleasure is ultimately manifested in the sex attraction between man and woman. The man lives simply to be attracted by women, and the woman lives simply to be attracted by men. That is the basic principle of material life. As soon as these attractions are combined, people become more and more implicated in material existence. In order to show them special favor, Krishna exhibited this Rasa Lila dance. It is just to captivate the conditioned souls. Since they are very much attracted by sex, they can enjoy the same life with Krishna and thus become liberated from the material condition. In the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit also explains that the pastimes and activities of Lord Krishna are medicine for the conditioned souls. If they simply hear about Krishna, they become relieved of the material disease. They are addicted to material enjoyment and are accustomed to reading sex literature. But by hearing these transcendental pastimes of Krishna with the gopis, they will be relieved of material contamination. How they should hear and from whom is also explained by Shukadeva Goswami. The difficulty is that the whole world is full of Mayavadis, and when they become professional reciters of Srimad Bhagavatam, and when people, without knowing the effect of the Mayavad philosophy, hear from such persons, they become confused. Discussion of the Rasa Lila among people in general is discouraged because they are affected by the Mayavad philosophy. But if one who is advanced explains and people hear from him, certainly the hearers will be gradually elevated to the position of Krishna consciousness and liberated from materially contaminated life. Another important point is that none of the gopis who danced with Krishna were in their material bodies. They danced with Krishna in their spiritual bodies. All their husbands thought that their wives were sleeping by their sides. The so-called husbands of the gopis were already enamored with the influence of the external energy of Krishna. So by dint of this very energy, they could not understand that their wives had gone to dance with Krishna. What then is the basis of accusing Krishna of dancing with others' wives? The bodies of the gopis, which were their husbands, were lying in bed, but the spiritual parts and parcels of Krishna were dancing with him. Krishna is the Supreme Person, the whole Spirit, and he danced with the spiritual bodies of the gopis. There is therefore no reason to accuse Krishna in any way. After the Rasa dance was over, the night of Brahma, a very, very long period, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, turned into the Brahma Muhurta. The Brahma Muhurta takes place about 1.5 hours before sunrise. It is recommended that one should rise from bed at that time and, after finishing daily ablutions, take to spiritual activities by performing Mangal Arati and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. This period is very convenient for the execution of spiritual activities. When that auspicious moment arrived, Krishna asked the gopis to leave. Although his beloveds were not willing to quit his company, they were very obedient to him. As soon as Krishna asked them to go home, they immediately left and returned home. Shukadeva Goswami concludes this episode of the Rasa Lila by pointing out that if a person hears from the right source about the pastimes of Krishna, who is Vishnu himself, and the gopis, who are expansions of his energy, then he will be relieved of the most dangerous type of disease, namely lust. In other words, one who actually hears the Rasa Lila will become completely freed from the lusty desire of sex life and elevated to the highest level of spiritual understanding. Generally, because they hear the Rasa Lila from Mayavadis, and they themselves are Mayavadis, people become more and more implicated in sex life. The conditioned soul should hear the Rasa Lila dance from an authorized spiritual master and be trained by him so that he can understand the whole situation. Thus one can be elevated to the highest standard of spiritual life. Otherwise one will be implicated. Material lust is a kind of heart disease, and to cure the material heart disease of the conditioned soul, it is recommended that one should hear, but not from the impersonalist rascals. If one hears from the right sources with right understanding, then his situation will be different. Shukadeva Goswami has used the word Shraddhanvita for one who is trained in spiritual life. Shraddha, or faith, is the beginning. One who has developed his faith in Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Spirit Soul, can both describe and hear the Rasa Lila. Shukadeva also uses the word Anushrinuyat. One must hear from the disciplic succession. Anu means following, and Anu also means always. So one must always follow the disciplic succession and not hear from any stray professional reciter, whether a Mayavadi or an ordinary man. Anu Shrinuyat means that one must hear from an authorized person who is in the disciplic succession and is always engaged in Krishna consciousness. When a person hears the Rasa Lila in this way, the effect will be sure. He will be elevated to the highest position of spiritual life. Shukadev Goswami uses two specific words, bhaktim and param. Bhaktim param means execution of devotional service above the neophyte stage. Those who are simply attracted to temple worship but do not know the philosophy of bhakti are in the neophyte stage. That sort of bhakti is not the perfectional stage. The perfectional stage of bhakti or devotional service is completely free from material contamination. The most dangerous aspect of contamination is lust or sex life. Bhaktim param, devotional service, is so potent that the more one advances in this line, the more he loses his attraction for material life. One who is actually deriving benefit from hearing the Rasa Lila dance surely achieves the transcendental position. He surely loses all traces of lust in his heart. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that according to the Bhagavad Gita, Brahma's day and Brahma's night are periods of solar years expanding to 4.3 million multiplied by 1,000. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Rasa dance was performed during the long period of Brahma's night, but the gopis could not understand that. In order to fulfill their desire, Krishna extended the night to cover such a great period of time. One may ask how this was possible, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reminds us that Krishna, although bound by a small rope, should show his mother the whole universe within his mouth. How is this possible? The answer is that he can do anything for the pleasure of his devotees. Similarly, because the gopis wanted to enjoy Krishna, they were given the opportunity to associate with him for a long period. This was done according to his promise. When Krishna stole the garments of the gopis while they were taking a bath at Chiragat on the Jamuna, he promised to fulfill their desire in some future night. In one night, therefore, they enjoyed the company of Krishna as their beloved husband, but that night was not an ordinary night. It was a night of Rama, lasting millions and millions of years. Everything is possible for Krishna, for he is the supreme controller. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 33rd chapter of Krishna, description of the Rasa dance. Chapter 34, Vidyadhara liberated and the demon Shankachuta killed. Once upon a time, the cowherd men of Vrindavan, headed by Nanda Maharaj, desired to go to Ambikavan to observe the Shiva Ratri ceremony. The Rasa Lila was performed during the autumn, and after that next big ceremony is Holi, or the Dola Yatra ceremony. Between the Dola Yatra ceremony and the Rasa Lila ceremony, there is an important ceremony called Shiva Ratri, which is especially observed by the Shaivites, or devotees of Lord Shiva. Sometimes the Vaishnavas also observe this ceremony because they accept Lord Shiva as the foremost Vaishnava. But the function of Shiva Ratri is not observed very regularly by the Bhaktas or devotees of Krishna. Under the circumstances, Srimad Bhagavatam states that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men once upon a time desired. This means that they were not regularly observing the Shiva Ratri function, but that once upon a time they wanted to go to Ambikavan out of curiosity. Ambikavan is somewhere in Gujarat province, and it is said to be situated on the river Sarasvati. Yet we do not find any Sarasvati river in Gujarat province, although there is a river named Sarvamati. In India, all the big places of pilgrimage are situated on nice rivers like the Ganga, Jamuna, Sarasvati, Narmada, Godavari and Kaveri. Ambikavan was situated on the bank of the Sarasvati, and Nanda Maharaj and all the other cowherd men went there. They very devotedly began to worship the deity of Lord Shiva and Ambika. It is the general practice that wherever there is a temple of Lord Shiva, there must be another temple of Ambika or Durga, because Ambika is the wife of Lord Shiva and is the most exalted of chaste women. She doesn't live outside the association of her husband. After reaching Ambikavan, the cowherd men of Vrindavan first bathed themselves in the river Sarasvati. If one goes to any place of pilgrimage, his first duty is to take a bath and sometimes to shave his head. That is the first business. After taking a bath, they worshipped the deities and then distributed charity in the holy places. According to the Vedic system, charity is given to the Brahmanas. It is stated in the Vedic Shastras that only the Brahmanas and the sannyasis can accept charity. The cowherd men from Vrindavan gave the Brahmanas cows decorated with golden ornaments and beautiful garlands. The Brahmanas are given charity because they are not engaged in any business profession. They are supposed to be engaged in Brahminical occupations, as described in the Bhagavad Gita. Namely, they must be very learned and must perform austerities and penances. Not only must they themselves be learned, but they must also teach others. Brahmanas are not meant to be Brahmanas alone. They should create other Brahmanas also. If a man is found who agrees to become a Brahmana's disciple, he is also given the chance to become a Brahmana. The Brahmana is always engaged in the worship of Lord Vishnu. Therefore, the Brahmanas are eligible to accept all kinds of charity. But if the Brahmanas receive excess charity, they are to distribute it for the service of Vishnu. In the Vedic scriptures, therefore, one is recommended to give charity to the Brahmanas, and by so doing, one pleases Lord Vishnu and all the demigods. The pilgrims take a bath, worship the deity, and give charity. They are also recommended to fast for 1 day. They should go to a place of pilgrimage and stay there for 3 days. The first day is spent fasting, and at night they can drink a little water, because water does not break the fast. The cowherd men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, spent that night on the bank of the Sarasvati. They fasted all day and drank a little water at night. But while they were taking rest, a great serpent from the nearby forest appeared before them and hungrily began to swallow up Nanda Maharaj. Nanda cried out helplessly, "My dear son Krishna, please come and save me from this danger. This serpent is swallowing me." When Nanda Maharaj cried for help, all the cowherd men got up and saw what was happening. They immediately took up burning logs and began to beat the snake to kill it. But in spite of being beaten with burning logs, the serpent was not about to give up swallowing Nanda Maharaj. At that time, Krishna appeared on the scene and touched the serpent with his lotus feet. Immediately upon being touched by the lotus feet of Krishna, the serpent shed its reptilian body and appeared as a very beautiful demigod named Vidyadhara. His bodily features were so beautiful that he appeared to be worshipable. There was a luster and effulgence emanating from his body, and he was garlanded with a gold necklace. He offered obeisances to Lord Krishna and stood before him with great humility. Krishna then asked the demigod, "You appear to be a very nice demigod and to be favored by the goddess of fortune. How is it that you perform such abominable activities that you got the body of a serpent?" The demigod then began to narrate the story of his previous life. "My dear Lord," he said, "in my previous life I was named Vidyadhara and was known all over the world for my beauty. Because I was a celebrated personality, I used to travel all over in my aeroplane. While traveling, I saw a great sage named Angira. He was very ugly, and because I was very proud of my beauty, I laughed at him. Due to this sinful act, I was condemned by the great sage to assume the form of a serpent." One should note here that before being favored by Krishna, a person is always under the modes of material nature, however elevated he may be materially. Vidyadhara was a materially elevated demigod, and he was very beautiful. He also held a great material position and was able to travel all over by airplane. Yet he was condemned to become a serpent in his next life. Any materially elevated person can be condemned to an abominable species of life if he is not careful. It is a misconception that after reaching the human body one is never degraded. Vidyadhara himself stated that even though he was a demigod, he was condemned to become a serpent. But because he was touched by the lotus feet of Krishna, he immediately came to Krishna consciousness. He admitted, however, that in his previous life he was actually sinful. A Krishna conscious person knows that he is always the servant of Krishna. He is most insignificant, and whatever good he does is by the grace of Krishna and the spiritual master. The demigod Vidyadhara continued to speak to Sri Krishna. Because I was very proud of the exquisite beauty of my body, he said, I derided the ugly features of the great sage Angira. He cursed me for my sin, and I became a snake. Now I consider that this curse by the sage was not at all a curse. It was a great benediction for me. Had he not cursed me, I would not have assumed the body of a serpent, and would not have been kicked by your lotus feet, and thus freed from all material contamination. In material existence, 4 things are very valuable: to be born in a decent family, to be very rich, to be very learned, and to be very beautiful. These are considered to be material assets. Unfortunately, without Krishna consciousness, these material assets sometimes become sources of sin and degradation. Despite Vidyadhara's being a demigod and having a beautiful body, he was condemned to the body of a snake due to pride. Therefore, from this incident, we can learn that those who are too proud of their material assets, or who are inimical toward others, are degraded to the bodies of snakes. A snake is considered to be the most cruel and envious living entity, but those who are human beings and are envious of others are considered to be even more vicious than snakes. The snake can be charmed or controlled by mantras and herbs, but a person who is envious cannot be controlled by anyone. My dear Lord, Vidyadhara continued, now since I think I may have become freed from all kinds of sinful activities, I am asking your permission to return to my abode, the heavenly planets. This request indicates that persons who are attached to fruitive activities, desiring promotion to the comforts of higher planetary systems, cannot achieve their ultimate goal of life without the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the less intelligent want to achieve material benefits and therefore worship different kinds of demigods, but that they actually get the benedictions from the demigods through the permission of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. Demigods have no power to bestow material profit. Even if one is attached to material benedictions, he should worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and ask him. Krishna is completely able to give even material benedictions. There is a difference, however, between asking material benedictions from the demigods and asking them from Krishna. Dhruva Maharaj worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead for a material benediction, but when he actually achieved the favor of the Supreme Lord and saw him, he was so satisfied that he refused to accept any material benediction. The intelligent person does not worship the demigods or ask favors from them. He directly becomes Krishna conscious, and if he has any desire for material benefit, he asks Krishna, not the demigods. Vidyadhara, awaiting Krishna's permission to return to the heavenly planets, said, now, because I have been touched by your lotus feet, I am relieved of all kinds of material pangs. You are the most powerful of all mystics. You are the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. You are the master of all devotees. You are the proprietor of all planetary systems, and therefore I am asking your permission. You may accept me as fully surrendered unto you. I know very well that persons who are constantly engaged in chanting your holy name attain release from all sinful reactions, and certainly persons who are fortunate enough to be personally touched by your lotus feet are freed. Therefore, I am sure that I am now relieved of the curse of the Brahmana simply by seeing you and being touched by your lotus feet. In this way, Vidyadhara got permission from Lord Krishna to return to his home in the higher planetary system. After receiving this permission, he circumambulated the Lord and offered his respectful obeisances unto him, and then he returned to his heavenly planet. Thus Nanda Maharaj was relieved of the imminent danger of being devoured by the snake. The cowherd men, who had come to execute the ritualistic function of worshipping Lord Shiva and Ambika, finished their business and prepared to return to Vrindavan. While returning, they recalled the wonderful activities of Krishna. By relating the incident of Vidyadhara's deliverance, they became more attached to Krishna. They had come to worship Lord Shiva and Ambika, but the result was that they became more and more attached to Krishna. Similarly, the gopis worshipped the goddess goddess Katyayani to become more and more attached to Krishna. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that persons who are attached to worshipping demigods like Lord Brahma, Shiva, Indra and Chandra for some personal benefit are less intelligent and have forgotten the real purpose of life. But the cowherd men, inhabitants of Vrindavan, were no ordinary men. Whatever they did for Krishna. If one worships demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to become more attached to Krishna, that is approved. But if one goes to the demigods for some personal benefit, that is condemned. After this incident, on a very pleasant night, Krishna and his elder brother Balaram, who are inconceivably powerful, went into the forest of Vrindavan. They were accompanied by the damsels of Vrajbhumi, and they began to enjoy their company. The young damsels of Vraja were very nicely dressed and anointed with pulp of sandalwood and decorated with flowers. The moon was shining in the sky, surrounded by glittering stars. The breeze was blowing, bearing the aroma of malika flowers, and the bumblebees were mad after the aroma. Taking advantage of the pleasing atmosphere, Krishna and Balaram began to sing very melodiously. The damsels became so absorbed in their rhythmical song that they almost forgot themselves. Their hair loosened, their clothes slackened, and their garlands began to fall to the ground. At that time, while Krishna, Balaram and the damsels were so much absorbed, almost in madness, a demoniac associate of Kuvera, the treasurer of the heavenly planets, appeared on the scene. The demon's name was Shankachud, because on his head there was a valuable jewel resembling a conch shell, just as the two sons of Kuvera had been puffed up over their wealth and opulence and did not care for Narada Muni's presence. This Shankachud was also puffed up over material opulence. He thought that Krishna and Balaram were two ordinary cowherd boys enjoying the company of many beautiful girls. Generally, in this material world, a person with riches thinks that all beautiful women should be enjoyed by him. Shankachud also thought that since he belonged to the rich community of Kuvera, he, not Krishna and Balaram, should enjoy the company of so many beautiful girls. He therefore decided to take charge of them. He appeared before Krishna, Balaram and the damsels of Vraja and began to lead the girls away to the north. He commanded them as if he were their proprietor and husband, despite the presence of Krishna and Balaram. Being forcibly taken away by Shankachud, the damsels of Vraja called out the names of Krishna and Balaram for protection. The two brothers immediately began to follow them, taking up big logs of shala wood in their hands. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid," they called to the gopis. "We are coming at once to chastise this demon." Very quickly, they reached Shankachud. Thinking the brothers too powerful, Shankachud left the company of the gopis and ran in fear for his life. But Krishna would not let him go. He entrusted the gopis to the care of Balaram and followed Shankachud wherever he fled. Krishna wanted to take the valuable jewel resembling a conch shell from the head of the demon. After following him a very short distance, Krishna caught him, struck his head with his fist and killed him. He then took the valuable jewel and returned. In the presence of all the damsels of Vraja, he presented the valuable jewel to his elder brother Balaram. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 34th chapter of Krishna, Vidyadhara liberated and the demon Shankachud killed. Chapter 35, the gopis' feelings of separation. The gopis of Vrindavan were so attached to Krishna that they were not satisfied simply with the rasa dance at night. They wanted to associate with him and enjoy his company during the daytime also. When Krishna went to the forest with his cowherd boyfriends and cows, the gopis did not physically take part, but their hearts went with him. And because their hearts went, they were able to enjoy his company through strong feelings of separation. To acquire this strong feeling of separation is the teaching of Lord Chaitanya and his direct disciples, the 6 Goswamis. When we are not in physical contact with Krishna, we can associate with him like the gopis through feelings of separation. Krishna's transcendental form, qualities, pastimes and entourage are all identical with him. There are 9 different kinds of devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna in feelings of separation elevates the devotee to the highest perfectional level, to the level of the gopis. It is stated in Srinivasacharya's prayer to the 6 Goswamis that they left the material opulences of government service and the princely status of life and went to Vrindavan, where they lived just like ordinary mendicants, begging from door to door. But they were so much enriched with the gopis' feelings of separation that they enjoyed transcendental pleasure at every moment. Similarly, when Lord Chaitanya was at Jagannath Puri, he was in the role of Radharani, feeling separation from Krishna. Those who are in the disciplic succession of the Madhva Gauriya Sampradaya should always feel separation from Krishna, worship his transcendental form and discuss his transcendental teachings, his pastimes, his qualities, his entourage and his associations. That will enrich the devotees to the highest devotional perfection. Feeling constant separation while engaged in the service of the Lord is the perfection of Krishna consciousness. The gopis used to discuss Krishna amongst themselves, and their talks were as follows. "My dear friends," one gopi said, "do you know that when Krishna lies on the ground, he rests on his left elbow, and his head rests on his left hand? He moves his attractive eyebrows while playing his flute with his delicate fingers, and the sound he produces creates such a nice atmosphere that the denizens of the heavenly planets who travel in space with their wives and beloveds stop their airplanes, for they are stunned by the vibration of the flute. The wives of the demigods who are seated in the plains then become very much ashamed of their singing and musical qualifications. Not only that, but they become afflicted with conjugal love, and their hair and tight clothes immediately loosen." Another gopi said, "My dear friends, Krishna is so beautiful that the goddess of fortune always remains on his chest, and he is always adorned with a golden necklace. Beautiful Krishna plays his flute in order to enliven the hearts of many devotees. He is the only friend of the suffering living entities. When he plays his flute, all the cows and other animals of Vrindavan, although engaged in eating, simply take a morsel of food in their mouths and stop chewing. Their ears raise up and they become stunned. They do not appear alive, but like painted animals. Krishna's flute playing is so attractive that even the animals become enchanted. And what to speak of ourselves?" Another gopi said, "My dear friends, not only living animals, but even inanimate objects like the rivers and lakes of Vrindavan also become stunned when Krishna passes with peacock feathers on his head and his body smeared with the minerals of Vrindavan. With leaves and flowers decorating his body, he looks like some hero. When he plays on his flute and calls the cows with Balaram, the river Jamuna stops flowing and waits for the air to carry dust from his lotus feet. But the river Jamuna is unfortunate like us and does not get Krishna's mercy. The river simply remains stunned, stopping its waves, just as we also stop crying for Krishna in expectation." In the absence of Krishna, the gopis were constantly shedding tears, but sometimes, when they expected that Krishna was coming, they would stop crying. But when they saw that Krishna was not coming, then again they would become frustrated and begin to cry. Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, the origin of all Vishnu forms, and the cowherd boys are all demigods. So just as Lord Vishnu is always worshipped and surrounded by different demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Indra, Chandra and others, when Krishna travelled through the Vrindavan forest or walked on Govardhan hill, he was accompanied by the cowherd boys. While walking, he played his flute just to call his cows. Just by his association, the trees, plants and other vegetation in the forest immediately became Krishna conscious. A Krishna conscious person sacrifices everything for Krishna. Although the trees and plants were not very advanced in consciousness, by the association of Krishna and his friends, they also became Krishna conscious. They then wanted to deliver everything, whatever they had, namely their fruits, flowers, and the honey incessantly falling from their branches. When Krishna walked on the bank of the Jamuna, he was seen nicely decorated with tilak on his face. He was garlanded with different kinds of forest flowers, and his body was smeared with the pulp of sandalwood and tulsi leaves. The bumblebees became mad after the fragrance and sweetness of the atmosphere and began to hum. Being pleased by the humming sound of the bees, Krishna would play his flute, and together the sounds became so sweet to hear that aquatic birds like cranes, swans, and ducks were charmed. Instead of swimming or flying, they became stunned. They closed their eyes and entered a trance of meditation in worship of Krishna. One gopi said, "My dear friends, Krishna and Balaram are nicely dressed with earrings and pearl necklaces. They enjoyed themselves on the top of Govardhan Hill, and everything becomes absorbed in transcendental pleasure when Krishna plays on his flute, charming the whole created manifestation. When he plays, the clouds stop their loud thundering out of fear of him. Rather than disturb the vibration of his flute, they respond with mild thunder, and so congratulate Krishna, their friend." Thank you so much, dear devotees, for your attention, for this wonderful reading of Krishna book. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Krishna book reading ki. Jai Jai Shri Radhe Gopinath, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.